Hello class, another lecture. I'd like to provide a code along to show you how you can create a generic class and utilize it. Remember, generics are a way to have a class or a function take many different types and have the same behavior. So the syntax for a generic class is pretty simple. You just have those angle brackets. I'm going to create a generic class for this demonstration. So I'm going to create a class with the class keyword, and then I'm just going to call this simple generic. And it's going to take a type, right? And we know that you have to provide the angle brackets after the class name if you want to specify a generic class. Now, I'm also going to use a generic constraint here. Kind of seems redundant, but I was having issues with the compiler complaining. So I'm going to say T, and I'm going to provide a colon saying that it extends any. Seems kind of not necessary because the any object is the top level class and every object extends any. But like I said, the compiler was complaining, so I'm just going to say T any. And you know this is a generic constraint because inside the brackets you have the colon, which represents extends. This is equivalent to extends in Java. This is saying that this class will accept any type that's a subclass of any. Right? And then we're also going to have this class take a parameter, which is of type T, to the constructor, the primary constructor. All this class is really going to do is it's going to it's going to create a member variable that may be null. So we're going to have a modifiable, mutable variable called reference that may be null, and it's going to be of type T. So it may be null, so I put the question mark after that, and I'm going to initialize it to null. And then inside my init block, I'm going to set my member variable to whatever was passed into the constructor. Right? And again, it kind of seems redundant, but for generic classes, this is what you want to do. So init, and I'm going to say reference equals param. So initially, my member variable reference is null, but then the constructor gets called and initializes the reference to the param that was passed in. I'm only going to have one. It keeps adding the brackets for me, even though I add them. Anyways, I'm going to only have one function in here. This is just going to print out the type. It's going to tell me what type it is, which demonstrates that this class takes multiple types. So it's not going to take any parameters, and all it's going to do is print out the type. So I'm going to say type, and then I'm going to use some string concatenation here, and I'm going to make sure it's not null because I won't be able to print this out unless it's not null. So I'm going to use a not null assertion. I'm going to say reference not null dot. Make sure I spell reference correctly. Remember those exclamation points? That's a not null reference. That's a not null thing. It's for type safety. It's saying that the reference cannot be null. And then I'm going to call a method called Java class dot get name. This is just going to return the class name that was passed in. So it's a very simple class. It's just a generic that takes any type of parameters and then assigns a member variable to whatever was passed in. And then print type will print out that type as long as it's not null. So my main function, I'm going to just create two instances of this class with two different types. I'm going to create a string. Well, let's say just temp. Not a great name. And I'm going to initialize this with a simple generic. And this is going to take a string. Let's say Jason's class. I'm going to create another, and then I'm going to actually call the print method on this, print type. That will tell me that it's a string class. And I'm going to also create another one, just temp2. Again, not great names. This one is going to take an integer. Or actually, let's make it take a Boolean. And we can call the java.lang Boolean and initialize it to true. So really what we're passing in here is a true variable. And then for this one, I'm going to print it out. And it's pretty simple, right? So really, I'm just creating two classes, an instance of a class of a generic, one with a string and one with a Boolean. So when I print this out, it should display the two different classes. And it does, right? It prints out string, Boolean. So again, the big benefit here is I'm able to use a class that has the same behavior for two different types, a string and an int. And it has the same member variables and the same behavior. I just wanted to show you one last thing. If I didn't want to use the null, not null assertion here, I could use a safe operator, but I'd have to provide them both for both of the calls. So I could use the safe operator and do that. And that's saying if it's not null, call Java class, but I'd also have to use it here. That's one of the reasons I used the exclamation point, so I only had to call it once. But this would work as well, and it would have the same output. Okay, thanks.